Hi, welcome to Growing in the Gospel. I'm Pastor Cary, and you've clicked into a long-form teaching series through the Gospel of John, chapter by chapter, verse by verse. What a journey is before us. This has been one of my favorite studies since I've been in the ministry. We're starting with John chapter 1 today, looking God in the face. And so track along with us through this entire gospel. The series is called Jesus Up Close. Maybe you want to do this with a small group or with a group of friends. This will be transformational to your walk with Jesus and to who you understand him to be. And so I pray today's message and this entire series will be a great encouragement and blessing to your heart.
Journey with us, verse by verse, through John's Gospel.
Well, this past week, I think it's Life magazine re-released a 2018 special edition of their magazine, Who Do You Say That I Am?, which is the question Jesus asked his followers. And so it's amazing to me that 2,000 plus years removed, the society in which we live is still asking that question about a Jewish itinerant teacher that lived in a remote region and never held office, never traveled very far from his birthplace, really only had a public ministry for 3 years. And here we are, 2,000 plus years removed, still asking the question, who is Jesus? And I want to begin this series by telling you that's the most important question you could ever ask. And you guys can advance that slide. That's the most important question you could ever ask. In this life, there is no more important question than who is Jesus. Why is that? It's because he made such overarching claims. His life was too influential, too formational on human history to ignore. You can't ignore him. You can't just compartmentalize him. His claims don't allow you to. You can't just say he was good, he was a teacher, he founded a religion. You can't just put him on the shelf amongst other, like Muhammad and Gandhi and other teachers and gurus over the years, because his claims flatten all of the other claims. His claims and his life and the story and the titles that he received and the reality of what happened in his life, you just can't get around it. You have to reckon with it. Everybody's got to answer this question, who is Jesus? And the answer you arrive at it's categorical, okay? You can't land anywhere in the mushy middle. You either have to totally discredit him, 100% reject him, despise him, hate him. He wasn't kind of good, because good men don't say, I am God. Good men don't say, worship me. Good men don't say, I'm everything you need. Good men don't say, I created you. What would you do if I walked up here today and I said, I created you? You would laugh me out of the room. What a ridiculous statement. And when you make a statement like that, it either is on the lines of absolutely wicked, evil deception, like totally destructive, or it's true. Like there's nothing good about it. You can't find this mushy middle. So with Jesus, you have to either totally discredit him or totally accept him and believe him. And if you believe him, then that opens up all kinds of other implications, and we're just going to barely scratch the surface of those today. But here's the thing about Jesus. His claims are so radical and so wonderful and so comprehensive, they're so cosmic in nature, that you have to investigate them. You can't ignore them. If you went home today and you had a voicemail or you had an email that said, from some law firm, that said you were the heir of a $100 million estate, and it looked valid, like on the surface, the email and the heading, and there's a phone number and there's an attorney, and he deals with heirs and inheritances, and would you just spam that email? Like, without any thought, would you just spam it? Some of you are going, yeah. But what if it's true? What if you are the heir of an estate you didn't know existed? What if you are the heir of $100 million? And what if this is a real attorney in a real firm with real access to this estate, and you are the genuine, the real, the substantive heir? What if? How would that change your life? Would that change your life? Talk to me. Yeah, a little, just a little. It would change your life. And so, you might think, okay, this is a fraud. You might go into it skeptical and doubtful. You might go into it like, you probably wouldn't tell anybody. Like, like if your friend gave you, this is the winning ticket, this is the winning lottery ticket for the $6 billion jackpot. You wouldn't tell anybody, but you might look at it. You might check it out. And that's the way it is with Jesus. His claims are so overarching that it bears investigation. And here's the beautiful thing. The more you investigate Jesus, the more you discover that that which is too good to be true is actually true. And that's what's so wonderful about the book of John. Now, I'm going to set this up. We're not going to look at John for a few minutes, so hang with me. First century Greek philosophy. First century was rife with lots of philosophical ideas. When we open the book of John, we're dropping in, contextually, we're dropping into, like 30 AD. But by the writing of it, we're dropping into about 90 AD. John's an old man now. But he's going to tell us a story that began to unfold when he was a teenager. He was likely the youngest of all the apostles. So contextually, we're talking about this Jewish world that was enmeshed under Roman tyranny and was surrounded, really immersed in the Greco-Roman world, which was a deeply philosophical world, a deeply mystical world, a deeply pluralistic world. Many gods, lots of ideas, and lots of debate about what was true and what was not true. And in Greek philosophy, there were basically two schools of thought. The Greeks had spent by this time hundreds of years looking and asking questions and looking for the reason for life, the reason for being. Why are we here? Where did we come from? What does it all mean? And they were coming to the conclusion that there was no reason, that there were no answers. By the way, this is where you live and where we live today. Today we call it postmodernism. The idea is that there is no truth and there is no reason, and so just make it up for yourself. And the Greeks were kind of coming to that same conclusion at about the first century. So there were these two main schools of thought, and you can find out a little more about them when you Google it yourself, but they were the Epicureans and the Stoics. I want you to say those two words. Epicureans, shout them out. And the Stoics, okay? So just remember this. We think of stoicism, we think of somebody that's stoic as very serious, right? That's kind of how you can separate these two words. The Epicureans had come to this conclusion. Since there's no answers, since there's no truth, there's no reason to any of this, just party. Just let it go. Like, live for the moment, indulge in all your pleasures. They were the wild kids. Okay? They were tomorrow we're going to die. There's no meaning to anything. There's no reason for anything. So just live to live. Just enjoy and indulge your pleasure. There is no morality. There's no meaning. There's no significance to any of it. So just let it go. All right. The Stoics, though, had the other conclusion. They were the moralists. They were the disciplinarians. They were the ones that said, hey, since there are no answers, we should still live as though there are. Since there is no meaning and structure to any of this or reason to any of this, we should still live as though there is. We should still live with discipline. We should still be moral. We should still be generous and act as though there is right and there is wrong. Because if we don't have that, we're going to lose our framework as a society. So they were a little bit afraid of the Epicurean philosophy that society would come undone. Indeed, it would have, okay? So they said, even though there's no framework to this, let's just pretend there is and still live by a framework and discipline. And that's basically where we are today. There's still those two primary schools of thought in philosophy and in secular reason today. The idea that, oh, there is no God, there is no logic to any of this, there's no reason to any of this. And so then there's two groups, it doesn't matter, so you create your truth and go live your wild life, or no, it does matter, and we should still live morally and generously and live by a framework. Postmodernism, as it exists today, goes right back to that first century Greco-Roman philosophical world, okay? And it leaves us with three huge problems. They existed in John's day, they existed in our day. Three really big problems. The first is that it leaves us lost in irrationality, okay? Lost in irrationality. What do I mean by that? Well, you've seen this, you've heard this around you, all around you in society today. Conflicting reason. Because there is no purpose and there's no value and there's no meaning and there's no significance and there's no framework to any of this, because we've erased all the boundaries in our modern culture, we're just swimming in an ocean of conflicting reason. Let me ask you some questions here. Are we erasing binaries or respecting them? In other words, do we honor women or is there no such thing as a woman? Like which is it? And both narratives are alive and well today. Okay. Do we defund the police or do we fight crime? And both narratives are alive and well. Like they're strong and loud. We're gonna fight crime. We're gonna defund. You know, culture is in this irrationality. All right, let me ask you a couple more. I'm not trying to be political. I'm just trying to show you we live in this conflicting day where people are kind of making it up as they go. Are we following science or our emotions or political persuasions? For instance, does life really matter, as in COVID? Or does it not matter, as in abortion? Is there such a thing as male or female or not? Is it a dynamic that God designed and a fixed dynamic that's both biological and psychological and kind of the whole being? Or is it just fluid, emotional psychology that we've made up as we go and, you can be whatever you want. You can be a tree if you want. Just self-declare, self-identify. What are you? Who are you? And are we respecting nature or disrespecting nature? In other words, we sacredize, we deify skin color differences, but then we demonize biological gender differences. But the same nature gave us both. You guys tracking with me? You see, we live in this world that there's just a constant conflict of irrationality. And this, by the way, this goes personally to us as well. In our personal lives, we struggle to, where do I find justice? Where do I find peace? Where do I find hope? Okay, first problem is we're lost in irrationality. Second problem is we're guessing our way forward in the dark. We're guessing our way forward. Because we don't have any framework of truth in our world today, we're guessing our way forward. And by darkness, I mean we're lost in an ocean with no meaning, so we don't really know what's right and wrong. We don't know what's true and false. I'm speaking, at large in the world in which we live. So we're just kind of guessing our way forward. Society is built on best guesses. I said this a few weeks ago. We just decide what we feel is right. We kind of go with our gut answers, and then we guess our way forward. And that's why faith conversation today is offensive, because people don't want to be reminded that they don't have answers. So when you bring out a Bible or you bring out a message like this today, people get kind of hostile because it disrupts them to be reminded that they don't have the answers. They would rather bury their head in the sand and kind of be a philosophical ostrich. So lost in irrationality, guessing our way forward in the dark. Third problem is, as a result of this, we're attempting to construct truth on our own, for ourselves. We're attempting to just make it up as we go. We decide what we believe based on our gut feelings. Doesn't matter if it agrees with the broader culture or not. Then we Google it, we validate it, we find a community of people that believe it. It's your truth and my truth. And then we're lost in this land. We have to validate and affirm everybody's truth individually, which gets really complex. And we've just completely erased the idea that there is objective truth, okay? That there is an objective reality, that there's a truth, that there's a kind of truth that goes, it transcends the idea of, okay, Dana likes snow and you don't like snow. Okay, so which is true? Well, both are true, but that's just personal preference. I like Dunkin', you like Starbucks. You're wrong, I'm right. Now, see, that's an objective truth, okay? No, I'm kidding. So personal opinion is not what we're talking about. We're talking about beneath all that, the foundational framework of life itself. Is there objective truth? Is there truth that we can discover and then stand on because it's true, because this is the way it is? Or can we just rewrite everything because it's all been constructed? Is it all a construct of man-made systems, or is there a God-constructed objective truth? We live in this world that's left us with these three problems: lost in irrationality, guessing our way forward in the dark, attempting to construct our own truth. Now, why do I set it up this way? Because John's going to answer these three problems in the first chapter of John. Because these are the same three problems that existed in first century in the Greco-Roman world. And so while culturally we're very different, we're also philosophically very much the same. Human heart and human need and human reason hasn't really gone that far in the last 2,000 years. Now, I need you to kind of hold that idea, and we're going to go to John 1. And let me set up, I want you to actually go to John chapter 20 to start with, okay? Let me give you a little background about John. You okay with that? Okay, John was the second most prominent disciple. You hear mostly about Peter. He was likely the youngest. He lived to be the oldest. He's writing this book as a very old man. He was the son of a woman named Salome. She perhaps was the sister of Mary, which may have made John the cousin of Jesus. We can't validate that, but that's just a suspicion. He had a brother named James. They were called the sons of Zebedee, and their nicknames were the sons of thunder because they were young and zealous and passionate, and they were ambitious, and they were energetic. They were flamboyant. They wanted to forbid a man to cast out demons in Mark 9. They wanted to call down fire to consume Samaritans in Luke 9. This is the team, the brothers, James and John, whose mother asked Jesus, "Can my sons rule at your right hand and your left hand in the kingdom?" Which really bothered all the other disciples. There's a bit of a rivalry between John and Peter that you can track through the Gospels. For instance, John 21, John is really clear to express all of Peter's problems. And then Peter is the one that goes, "Well, what about this guy?" When Jesus says, you're going to die for me, and Peter looks around and sees John, he goes, "What about him?" They had this little rivalry going on. And that's because John was really close to Jesus. You could say it this way: he was essentially Jesus' best friend. He was the one at the Last Supper that was leaning on Jesus. He referred to himself in his own gospel as the disciple Jesus loved. He was the closest of all the disciples to the Savior. And at the end, on the cross, if you remember, this is the disciple to whom Jesus gave responsibility or care for his mother Mary. Okay, so we're talking about someone very, very close to Jesus, and we're hearing from someone who walked with him and knew him. And here's the thing: he started out real impetuous and brash and zealous and ambitious and kind of, wanting the top place with Jesus, but he aged really well. He matured really well. He wrote 5 books of the Bible: John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, which are letters, and then finally Revelation. He wrote of these words. Let me give you the key words. You might want to write these down. The word he uses the most is believe. 100 times in this gospel, he's going to challenge us to believe. He's going to cause us to inspect our belief. That's why I start with all this philosophy, because he's going to drive right at the core, the foundation of your belief and your belief system. And he's going to cause you, if you're a believer, he's going to cause you to ask yourself some uncomfortable questions about your relationship with Christ. If you're an unbeliever, he's going to force you to explore the claims of Christ against the backdrop of all of your other options. And we're going to find out that Jesus is really the best answer to all the philosophical questions. He wrote of love 80 times in all of his letters, the word love 80 times, and the word truth 45 times. So if you take those words, those emphases, and you kind of step back from all of John's writings, here's what you get. John writes to give us truth, objective, discovered truth, truth that's true whether we like it or not. Truth that never changes no matter what else changes in our lives. He writes to give us truth that we might believe and then enter into a relationship of love with Jesus. Truth, belief, and love. He says, I want you to have the truth. I want you to believe that truth. And in believing that truth, you're going to enter into a relationship with love of Jesus. He gives us basically the thesis of his gospel at the very end. Remember when you were in school and you had to write your thesis at the beginning of your paper? John puts it at the end. And it's in chapter 20, it's in your outline in verse 30. He says, many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples. John's going to talk about 11 miracles, 7 main ones and then some other stories, but mostly 11 in his gospel, validating and proving the authority and the divinity, the deity of Jesus, the identity of Jesus. He says, many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. I didn't have time to write them all. I couldn't contain them all. But look at the verse 31. But these are written. So John's telling us here, why am I writing this? These are written, say it out loud, church, that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that you believing you might have life through his name. So John's gospel brings us face to face with Jesus. Face to face with Jesus. Jesus up close. John's message in big picture is that the Creator God, the creator of all of it, has come to earth to reveal himself to us in human form for the purpose of rescuing us. And that rescue becomes ours by belief alone. So, that's the introduction. I want you to take those two things that we've set up now, the problems of our philosophical day. We're lost in irrationality. We're guessing our way forward. We're attempting to make up, construct truth for ourselves. And let's dive into what John writes to give us truth that we don't make up for ourselves, truth that we discover, truth that we can build our lives on and find hope and direction, and as he says, life. John opens his gospel with what I would call a cosmic opening. He takes us up to the tallest philosophical mountain, to the very pinnacle of the highest peak. And he says, now survey all of time and all of reality, and here's the answer to it all. Here we go. He's going to solve these 3 problems, these 3 tensions in verses 1 through 14. Let's read it together. John 1 through 14. You guys with me? You okay? Okay. In the beginning was the Word. Now, that's a capital W. Notice that? That's a name. All right? And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The first thing I want you to write down in your outline is that Jesus is the face of reason. We're going to look for a few minutes into the face of God. That's what John is going to do to us right now. He's going to put right before us the face of our Creator. And so he begins with this word logos. In the beginning was the Word. That's the English, capital W, it's a name, the Word. The Greek word is logos. The logos was what the Greeks referred to in that philosophical world, that Epicurean and that Stoic world. It's what they referred to as the sum total of all truth and all reason and all meaning. And in their minds, it was an abstract. Okay, to bring it into the 21st century, there's some Star Wars fans in the room, I would assume. A few? Anybody ever heard of the Force? Okay. John saying, in the beginning was the Logos, would be kind of like if I were standing in a room of unbelievers and I stood up and I said, before anything, before ever there was a planet or space or a universe or a cosmos, there was the Force. That's what he's saying. He's referring to their philosophical pinnacle, that what they assumed was the foundation of everything. They didn't know what it was, that they had eventually come to the realization that they couldn't figure out what it was, that there was something holding everything together. There was some meaning, there was some reason, there was some logic, Okay, the word logos is from where we get logic. There was some purpose, there was some truth that brought harmony to everything, that made everything make sense. That there was a story to be told about all of creation and all of life that made sense and that gave purpose and significance to it all. And so he grabbed their word. And in introducing God through Jesus, he used this word logos, which was like a lightning strike in this day to say, in the beginning was the logos. That wasn't so massive except where he goes with it. He says the word, the logos, was with God. So separate, distinct, okay, distinct from God. But look at the rest of verse 1. And the word was what? It was God. So in this very first verse, John says, hey, yeah, there is a force. The force, the logos, the reality, the meaning of everything was with God and was God. It's a reference to Trinity, to the Trinity, God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. I don't have time to go into all the in-depth theology of that. But John is saying the logos, here it is, the logos is a person. The logos is not just some idea or some force or some metaphysical energy. The logos is not just some spirit world. The logos is not, as pantheism says, everywhere in everything and we're all a part of the God force. No. The logos is not just a principle. The logos is not just a philosophical idea or concept. Logos is a person. Logos is alive and has reason. And in these first couple of verses, look at them again. In the beginning was the Word. So before anything existed, Jesus existed. By the way, I think you get this. He's referring to Jesus, okay? And that's going to become clear all the way through the first chapter, and we're going to spend several weeks in the first chapter. He's introducing Jesus as eternally pre-existent, like he's always been, eternally co-existent as God with God, and eternally self-existent, like not created. And he says the Word was with God and the Word was God. The same, verse 2, was in the beginning with God. And look at verse 3. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. So, John says, look into the face of reason. Jesus is creator. He is originator. He is author. Pastor, how does that solve the problem? Well, it solves the first problem of irrationality. There's reason behind it all. There's truth behind it all. And truth is a person. Truth is not a force that you can tap into and leverage. Truth is not a spirit that you can become a greater conscious, more conscious human being. It's not a New Age concept. It's not a Star Wars concept. Truth is a person, and the person is Jesus. And he created all things. Revelation says, and for his pleasure they were created. Hebrews says, God spoke in times past through the prophets, but now he speaks through his Son. Colossians 1 says he's the image of the invisible God. He's God with a face. He's looking to the face of God. You want to know what God is like? You look at Jesus. By him were all things created. All things were created by him and for him. He is before all things, and by him all things consist. Colossians 2. In him dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily. Here's how it solves the problem. You don't have to live in irrationality. You can know reason because you can know your creator. Let me say it another way. You have an author, which means you have a story worth living. And you have a story that's meaningful. Jesus is reason. He is reason in person. He is creator in person who came to earth telling you that you have meaning and you have value and you have significance, you have purpose, and you are loved more than you ever hoped you could be. This past week, Amy Hunt emailed me a video, and I want to share it with you. It was a 4.5-minute video. I was able to chop it down to about 3:15 or so it's a little bit longer, but I want you to catch this. It's Canadian philosopher Jordan Peterson, who is like that close to becoming a Christian. He's not a Christian. He's a secular psychologist. one of the world's most famous psychologists. But I want you to hear what he says about reason and about society and about the framework of truth that holds societies together. And this will resonate with you and with this point from John. Did you hear that? Now, I know some of that lost you. It lost me the first time too, okay? What he's saying is the same thing John was saying. We all have a foundational framework of how we understand the world around us. There is a framework that is true. God, through John, calls that framework the Word. You ever have somebody say, Word? What do they mean? End of argument. Like that's the final word, okay? Jesus is the final word. He is the ultimate framework of truth. If you believe and trust Jesus, you are now standing on solid reality, like the way things really are. When you reject Jesus and get off that framework, now you've got to reconstruct it for yourself. You got to make it up as you go. You got to dabble with philosophy and mysticism and spiritism and New Ageism and whatever other isms there are to construct your framework. And what Peterson is saying, and here's what he's got his own reckoning to do, because now he's at the point where he goes, yeah, the Bible's true. It's so true, it's truer than true. It's like it's the framework by which everything is, all truth that we know is true has been established. Like it's the framework of truth. What he's wrestling with, and I've shown you this in other clips, is the implications of that. Because you can't say it's true and then just walk away from it. That's not rational. That's like saying I've got cancer, but oh well, I'm just going to walk away and forget about it. Okay? No, you've got to deal with it. You've got to be once you're confronted with truth, you've got to respond to it. Okay? So profound that John begins by saying, hey, you want to know the reason, you want to know the answer to all your questions, you want to know the answer, the meaning and the substance and the truth of your whole life, your whole existence, it is Jesus. You don't have to live in irrationality. Number two, and we'll speed up to the end here, hang with me. Jesus is not only the face of reason, he's the face of goodness. John, I really wrestled with how to unpack the words life and light, and I want you to look at it in verse 4. In him was life. So theologically, scientifically, biologically, yes, he gave you life. He's the author of life. He's the source of life. It did not spontaneously generate. And those who believe that are taking a flying leap into radical blind faith, okay? Regardless of what you believe about evolution, I'm talking about all the way at the beginning, at the generation of life. That answer to that question is either the Logos, the Word, spoke life into being, or somehow out of nothing, life spontaneously generated, which is like saying my Apple Watch spontaneously constructed itself, like materialized. It's ridiculous. It takes more faith to believe that life spontaneously generated than it does to believe that the Word, the Logos, created life. So he is the life, but in a more personal, practical sense, he's the true life. He came to give you not just eternal life, but abundant life, quality life. The word, the Greek word is zoe. So bios is your physical life. Suke is your psychological self. Zoe is quality of life. It's God life. It's whole life. It's deep abundance of really living, okay? It's the you only live once kind of life, but real. Like the YOLO life is a joke. That's like Epicurean, right? But this is real quality, abundant life. He is life and he is light. Light, not only in the sense of I need direction and I need to know what steps to take and how to make my decisions, how to build my life, but light as opposed to darkness, good as opposed to bad, righteousness as opposed to wickedness and evil. And he comes and look at what John says. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, but look at this, and the darkness comprehended it not. The word comprehend in our vernacular means to understand. But the way the translators are using it here, it means to overcome and almost to apprehend. It's a different use of the word, okay? So what John is saying is this Logos, Jesus, came into darkness, shattered it with light, finally once and for all enlightened dark minds and dark realities and showed hope and a way to understanding how life works. He shined the light, but the darkness couldn't overcome it. The darkness couldn't take it down. Verse 6, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. We're going to talk more about him next week. The same came for a witness to bear witness of the light, that all men through him might, what's the word? Believe. He was not that light, but sent to bear witness of that light. That was the true light which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. He was in the world. The world was made by him. The world knew him not. He came unto his own, talking about the Hebrew people, and his own, the Jews, received him not. So, my friend, Jesus is the face of reason, but he's the face of goodness. He's the face of life and light. The things that you and I are looking for all day, every day, in our material world, and in our corporate world, and in our the unfolding of our everyday lives, and our relationships, and our families, and our work, the fulfillment, the joy, the direction, the meaning, it's in Jesus. In him is life. I want you to see thirdly, Jesus is the face of truth. You still with me? This is important. He's the face of reason. He's the face of goodness, life and light, and he's the face of truth. In a world that's my truth versus your truth, that objective, that mushy subjective truth, John says, look at verse 12, as many as received him, to them. So there was a kind of person that received him, that believed. As many as received him, to them gave you the power to become the sons of God. Relationship. Even to them that believe on his name, which were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor the will of man, but of God. We're going to come back to this in a minute. And the Word, the Logos, Jesus, was made flesh. He broke into time and space. He punched a hole in the roof of the world and stepped in onto planet Earth. He was made flesh. He put on a body, and he dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Full. I want you to say that phrase, the very last phrase of verse 14. Ready, go. Full of grace and truth. Grace and truth. I want you to marry those terms in your mind for a minute. And remember, John writes to give us truth, a framework, a foundation, that we might believe, choose to believe in that framework, that reality, and enter into a relationship of love with Jesus. Why does John say truth and grace? Truth and grace. Because truth with no love is just harsh judgmentalism. On the other hand, love with no truth is powerless sentimentalism at best and gushy deception at worst. But truth balanced by love is Jesus, grace and truth. He's true, but he also is the embodiment of love and grace. Now, this is astounding. I don't think I'm doing this justice. John has just done like a triple lightning strike into first century Greco-Roman world. He has said, number one, your reason for everything is a person. Not a force, not an abstract, but a person. Oh, and number two, that person visited planet Earth. He's been here and gone. And what he did when he was here, what he accomplished when he was here, when we were able to look into his face, what we saw was truth, yes, absolute, objective, creator, author of everything. But what we also saw when we looked into his face was grace, love. And the two together means you don't have to construct your own truth, and you don't have to be afraid of truth. This is so important. You don't have to go through life living in lies, making it up as you go. You can know the truth, and Jesus said the truth would make you free. It would liberate you in ways you've never imagined. Okay? But not only that, not only do you not have to construct truth for yourself? You don't have to be afraid of the truth. There are a lot of atheists, there are a lot of philosophers that have said, I don't believe in God, but that belief is based on the fact that I don't want him to exist. I don't want to have to answer to God. Now, you help me out. Underneath that reason, what is that? Fear. It's a belief in God that's being denied by fear. I'd rather not him exist. I'd rather not answer to him, so I'll just reason him away to get out from under the fear of the confrontation that I would have if I came face to face with God. If I came face to face with all reality, all reason, all meaning, all truth, what would happen? Well, what John is saying in John 1 is truth is a person. Truth came to visit earth. And when we could look into his face, he wasn't just truth. He was also love and grace and mercy. Which leads me to my final statement, and that is Jesus is the face of perfect love. John's going to challenge us over and over in this book to examine our belief. As believers and unbelievers, whether you believe in Jesus or not, I'm talking to you, okay? Because everything flows from what you choose to believe. We can play the philosophical ostrich and bury our head in the sand and walk away from these deep realities, or we can look into the face of Jesus and reckon with his claims. I love this statement by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. The simple step of a courageous individual is to not take part in the lie. Do you realize on Monday, as you go to work, there's a massive movement on to get you to partake in the lie? Why? Because that's what's going to make you advance your career. That's what's going to get you promoted. That's what's going to get you the bonus. That's what's going to make you eligible for the next promotions. You got to play the lie. You got to go along with the lie. But courage says, no, I'm going to stick with Logos. I'm going to stick with Jesus. So believers, let me ask you, is Jesus your Logos? Is he your final word? Or are you making it up as you go and just tacking the name Jesus on? Okay. And then if you're an unbeliever, I invite you today to just look into his face, the face you're afraid to look at, the face of God that you're afraid to look at, and you're not going to see what you think you're going to see. You're going to see love and grace and mercy. You're going to see open arms. You're going to see love that, as we sang a little while ago, left the 99 and ran passionately after you to rescue you. I came across a story this week that I want to close with. It'll take me just a second to read it. It was posted on Facebook by a lady named Leanne Jenkins. She's a believer. She's an elementary teacher in Pensacola, Florida. You know how Facebook, you just end up seeing stuff by people you never even met or you don't even know how you know them, right? Just shared by shared and shared. And so this is one of those things. I reached out to Leanne, asked her if I could use this story, and she gave me permission. And here's what she posted this week as an event that happened in her elementary class in Pensacola. She said, on Monday, I had a first. I had a student in frustration call me the B word, or rather shouted at me from the back of the classroom. Now, I'm not naive enough to think I've never been called that before, but it was definitely the first time a student said it out loud. I was in complete shock. I didn't even know how to respond. How could that word come out of that adorable little thing? I was mad, of course, and it was taken care of, but I have to admit, my heart was broken. Not so much about the word, but about the circumstance. I may or may not have been warned about this kiddo, she says, and I so badly wanted to develop a good relationship with him. We were 3 weeks into a new semester, and we were off to an amazing start. The rapport was thick. The next day, I was at a competition, so I was not at school. But I thought about this little boy and the situation so much, I wondered, what would I say when I saw him again? Today, he walked into my classroom like a scared little puppy. He instantly caught my face, and I could tell he was trying to read every emotion. She said, I instantly turned on the biggest smile that I could. And I said, "Good morning." He instantly melted. He literally came running to me, gave me the biggest hug ever, and said, "Mrs. Jenkins, I'm so very sorry." I'm not sure I ever heard a more genuine apology. There was so much heart behind the way he said it. And my heart broke again into 100 pieces. Did he do something wrong? Yes. Were there consequences? Yes. But boy, there was redemption. And my heart was redeemed as much as his. Listen. When he was searching my face, he wasn't just searching to see if anger was there. He was searching to see if love was there. He was searching to see if the good relationship we had started could be redeemed, even through huge mistakes. It reminded me how important it is to show grace. We're all human, we're all dumb, we're all lost, and terrified over the mistakes we make. Most of us are just trying to make it, but then there's grace. And oh, it is so beautiful and so undeserved. Now, my friend, when you look into the face of Jesus, you're looking into the face of God. And you see truth. Oh, for sure you see truth. And you're looking for judgment. You're looking for that condemnation, and you know we deserve it. I deserve it, you deserve it. But when you look into the face of Jesus, the Word, the Logos who came to earth, you're shocked. And you're disarmed and you're undone, because the face that is justly vindicated to be angry at you is softened with love and grace and mercy. And that's why he says, as many as received him, he gives the power to become the sons of God. Even to them that believe on his name. It's a new birth. It's new life. Not of blood. It's not a biological birth. Not of the will of the flesh. It's not a religious or a hard work birth. Not of the will of man. It's not something another man can pronounce upon you, but of God. It's a birth that God gives you into relationship with him, full of grace and truth. If you know Jesus, my challenge to you today is, let him be your Logos, and have courage and don't live the lie. And if you don't know Jesus, the invitation is look into his face and see if you don't want to run into his arms and be folded up into the salvation that only he can give.
Well, we're just really getting started. John chapter 1, Jesus, be my truth, be my authority, be my reality. I love the fact that John is writing to show us truth so that we might believe, so that we might know a relationship of love. Truth, belief, love. We're going to talk a lot about those words in the coming days. I'm glad you've started the Gospel of John. This is just part 1, so let's stick together for the study, and I hope all of it will be an encouragement to your heart. And friend, if you haven't trusted Jesus as your Savior, right now, there's no better time than right now. Why don't you bow your head and heart and receive him and tell him you'd like to do what John talks about in chapter 1. As many as received him, to them gave he the power to become the sons of God. You can be born into God's family this moment by placing your faith and trust in Jesus Christ alone. And I look forward to rejoicing if that's your decision today. Share some comments, share the series, share the channel, stick around, take the journey with us. We'll see you in the next one.